Thanks for visiting with us today. I always like having you here. So I saw that your alma mater is Millsaps College there in Jackson, Mississippi,
Correct.
and that's for undergrad and MBA. And then your JD came from University of Mississippi. So would you call Mississippi your roots, your home?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Mississippi. I grew up in a small town called Magnolia, which is population 2,500 on a good day when a baby's born. It's located about 100 miles north of New Orleans, right on Interstate 55. So it's kind of nestled in that southwest corner of the state of Mississippi, just above that Louisiana line. Um, Grew up playing sports and being involved in the community, small town. I walked to school and just wanted to spend my time being outside and riding bikes, playing sports, and had the good opportunity to go to Millsaps to play college baseball and started my career in athletics administration. I didn't know that I was going to fall into it that way, but worked as a sports information and student worker while in college and decided to go to MBA school and work full time and then go to law school all in Mississippi. So that's my Mississippi roots for you there.
Yeah, I saw baseball is in your background.
Yeah.
So first base, right field, because that's what I played.
Middle infielder, primarily second base. Yeah.
Gotcha, gotcha. And then from that time you mentioned college baseball. So, what besides Millsaps, were there any other universities or institutions vying for your skills?
No, no, there were not. I was either going to go to Ole Miss for undergrad or I was going to play baseball and go to Millsaps. Millsaps was the right decision for me, and it wasn't baseball related necessarily. It was just the entire environment. Smaller campus, was able to get involved as a student, certainly follow a passion of working in higher ed and athletics administration. But the opportunity to play baseball was present too. And so I enjoyed my 4 years playing for sure.
Now you're an administrator or on that side of the sports realm. So when you were an athlete, what's an interaction or exchange that you remember that you had with one of your coaches that maybe at the time you thought was unnecessary or too much, but in the end, it's actually proven useful?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. So my college baseball coach, who has been at Millsaps now, he's going into his 39th year, been there a long time, is a dear friend, a mentor, and one of the best baseball minds that I've ever been around. Uh, my first day as a student or as a student athlete at practice, it was an intimidating day, right? You can just imagine as a freshman going in. This is a really good baseball program, and you kind of feel out of place, like you're dealing with these guys that are a few years older, and they're bigger, they're stronger, they're everything, and you're just like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? And Coach Page, Jim Page is my coach's name. Coach Page is a hitting coach. Like it's he he wants you to get 3 outs any way that you can on the defensive side as quick as you can so you can come in and hit. Like, I mean, he cares about pitching and defense, but it's really like, I don't care how you get it done so we can come in and hit. So he had all the new guys hit on the first day of practice. And so that means you're on the field, you got the dome that's covering home plate. And I take 3 swings. Now I make contact, but I take 3 swings and he said, "Hey, Mitchell, why don't you come see me?" And so he was standing on the other side of the cage. I went around and he said, "Who taught you how to hit?" And I don't know what to say. So I just default to my high school coach. I said, "Well, coach, it was my high school coach." And he says, "Well, the next time you see your high school coach," and I'm not going to use the words he used, but you tell him he blanking sucks. Okay. So that was the first real moment with my college coach that I had. Now, he was not necessarily being overly critical, but he was making a point, and it was kind of a joking thing. Everybody was laughing, me too. I mean, what else are you going to do? But then the most critical thing happened. He said, I want you to go down to our cage that's kind of down a hill where our stadium was. He said, I'll meet you there in 5 minutes. I'm going to teach you how to hit. And so he was making light of the situation. I was petrified, as a freshman initially. And then he came down and he spent the next 30 minutes working on some things with me. And then you began to trust that what he was saying was absolutely spot on. I'd never been educated like this. Like I learned more about the game of baseball in those first couple of practices as a freshman in the fall of, dating myself here, this was the fall of 97. And I, from that point on, I just soaked in everything that he had to say and continued to. And I'm kind of I like coaching. I've been around college baseball my entire career, so I'd like to think I know a thing or two. But man, I learned so much from him, and that moment is it always just sticks out to me as funny. Uh, but in the moment, it was scary, but it was also so educational, and I just took how deeply caring he is about his players. And when I say he's been there for 39 years, I mean he's now coaching generations of baseball players, because we've got some of those older guys have sons now that have played for him, and it's just a remarkable deal.
Did you ever go back to that high school coach? Maybe not to relay the
No, I
message,
never called him.
but did you
No,
ever,
no,
go back and talk to him?
no, that was.
But you've coached too, though, right?
Yeah,
Baseball?
yes.
Okay, so then in that case, maybe how does that anecdote translate into how you approached your athletes? Things you
Well,
did or maybe things you didn't do.
well, I usually don't go as hard in the paint, so to speak, as my coach did with me that first time. And I'm primarily coaching, 12, 13-year olds. Uh, and so you have to be a little bit delicate with them. But I actually worked with Coach Page for a year, and was on his staff right out of college as I was running our media relations office and going to MBA school. But I knew that coaching at the college level wasn't for me, and I was going to pursue administration. Um, but I think you have to care for your players. You have to teach. You have to. It's you need to be firm and demand a certain level of execution and demand a certain level of effort. But you got to teach, and he's a teaching coach, and I'd like to think that I'm the same way. The coach was inducted into the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame 2 summers ago. So this was, what year are we in, guys? 26.
Mhm.
So this was the summer of 24, I think. And yes, and I told him when I went down there for it, because a lot of people went. It was a big deal for him, big deal for us as a program, and told him that even if he's got former players who have sons that aren't playing for him at the college level, he's still having generational impact because of the lessons he taught us that we're providing to our children. Uh, and it's for a big, rough guy to tear up when you tell him those things after a distinguished career is pretty meaningful. And so, yeah, it's been fun.
So you were talking about caring for your players and you mentioned teaching coaches. So
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting distinction. So, okay, now moving into the college realm. I mean, this is kind of
Yep.
your area, your forte.
Yep.
Okay, so with NIL and transfer portal, the way that
You're going to
exists.
bring that up?
Oh, I am going to bring
Yeah.
that up. You knew
Yep.
I was gonna.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, is there still a place in your estimation for teaching coaches? Because teaching takes time.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to. Even though I think we're now, it's just a departure from what we're used to doing. We are creating uh, teams. We're developing teams year after year as opposed to developing a program, which again is a departure from the way things used to be. In order to take a group of individuals on day one and make them the best they can possibly be by the end of that particular season, if you skip over the teaching part, you got no chance. You just got no chance. And so I would say that we have 16 head coaches representing 19 sports within the Ball State Athletics Department. And if they take the teaching element out of it, they got no chance. And look, we've got some teams that are doing really, really well. And trust me, there's a lot of teaching going on. We've got a handful of teams that stink and there's still teaching going on, right? Uh, but it's just, I mean, that's part of the landscape of sports. Every year is different. Every team is different. And if you don't resort back to kind of the fundamental approach of how you want your teams to play, it's gonna not go well.
Still talking coaching, I am curious because you got, I'm sure if we, these are just the ones off the top of my head, Kansas State, they're getting rid of their basketball coach.
Yep.
And if you go back to football season, there was a lot of shifting
Yep.
that's happening
Right.
on the coaching side. So when you're hiring new coaches,
Mhm.
what do you prioritize?
Yeah, great question. So I look through what I call windows. I got three windows that I look through. I've done this either in my capacity as a athletic director or if I've been on a search committee working to hire somebody along with a director of athletics who would have been my boss. So these three windows, the first one is competence. Okay. So I'm looking through this window and I want to see from a candidate for a job that he or she knows um, how to structure a practice, what a recruiting philosophy looks like, how to evaluate talent, what what a proper film session looks like, how to game plan, how to schedule, uh, how to hire a staff. It's a pretty exhaustive list. And I need them to tell me about those things in the interview process. And I'll ask questions about it. Tell me about how you would construct your staff. Tell me about how you evaluate talent. Tell me, and I will know quickly whether the person knows what he or she's talking about or whether they're not ready. Okay. So that's the first window. Second window is the window of connectivity. They need to be able to tell me uh, and demonstrate to me how they relate to other people. So how they relate to their staff, how they relate to their current team, how they relate to a recruit and that recruit's family, how they relate to other coaches in the department, how they relate to staff in the department, how they relate with faculty, how they relate with donors. Okay, it's not enough to just be a great X's and O's type of coach. There's so much more connectivity that you have to have, and that coach has to demonstrate that in the interview process. Okay, now those that have already been head coaches before are going to have a leg up in those two windows because they've done it before, right? But for coaches that haven't had the opportunity, the interviews are really uh, significant pressure cooker. Like they got to come with it, right? And then that third window is uh, competitiveness, right? I need to see in the interview that if we were to go out and play one on one, okay, or go play horse or go play ping pong, whatever it is, that he wants to beat me because I want to beat him. Does that make sense? And that's I'm being silly a little bit when I say that, but you can tell in an interview if winning's important to them or if it's not. And for the most part, that's the easiest window to score points with because you're not going to be at this level without wanting to win. Okay, but you still have to talk about it a little bit. And I want to hear about development. I want to hear about a process. Like that's really important. But you got to talk about winning championships too.
So competitiveness, competence, and connected. Those are the qualities or the priorities in hiring a coach. So back earlier when you mentioned that we're kind of developing teams, maybe instead of necessarily programs. So kind of curious too for values. So, and I mean, I feel like this question could be a two-parter because you may have when you coach, the 12 and 13-year-olds, you have your values. I'm kind of curious what those are, but then also, do those transfer in your estimation to the collegiate scene, or is there maybe a different set of values there at that level?
I think those are very team specific, very individual in terms of how a coach leads his or her program. Um, I do think you, the controllables,
Mhm.
right, are, and you hear coaches say this all the time. It gets to the point where it's kind of cliche, but you can control your attitude and your effort, right? I mean, you'll hear that all the time. The reality, though, is it's really true, and it has nothing to do with, or it isn't all related to sport. It's in our daily lives, right? All you guys in here right now, you made a conscious decision to come to class today. Okay. And you either have a good attitude about yourself right now or you don't. And you're applying great effort and taking notes and listening, or you're not. Right. And those are decisions to make. And so it's the same thing when we're talking about our student athletes. And I tell my two kids, I've got a senior in high school and a seventh grader. And from the time that they could comprehend words and regurgitate them to me, when I ask them, what three things can you control? It's attitude, effort, and then I add in concentration. You can control whether you're concentrating or not. And so if like my seventh grader, when I take him to school some days, it's like, all right, dude, great day. What three things can you control? And at this point, he's rolling his eyes and just saying attitude, effort, concentration. Dad, I said, have a great one. Go. Right. But it's he knows. And that for him to be able to know that he can control those things in the classroom, and then when he's playing sports or whatever, or just being at home, it's you guys, when you get home, sometimes it's a safe haven and you can act up a little bit. Me too, with my parents, when I'm in my 40s. And it's kind of a safe haven, but sometimes we have to snap out of that and behave ourselves.
Well, and you've been an athletics director or administrator for a little over 20 years, if I counted right, going back to director of sports info at Millsaps
Yep.
and then Santa Clara University,
Yep.
now Ball State. So I'm curious what makes Ball State unique compared to your previous administrative roles.
Yeah, I was at Santa Clara for about 12 years. And then, and I look, when I got to Santa Clara, I was a recent law graduate, had an MBA, had 2 years of real working experience under my belt, plus being a graduate assistant when I was at Ole Miss, working in the Ole Miss athletics department. So I thought that I was ready, for an opportunity. I had to volunteer at Santa Clara before I got a full-time job there. And now that it took off there, I got promoted. I kept getting more and more responsibility. Eventually served as the interim AD for about 5 months there, and then finished my time there as the number two administrator, working for the new AD after we'd had a leadership change. Then I went to Southern Miss. So I was the deputy AD at Southern Miss. Also had a stint as the interim AD there for from December through May, December 19 through May of 20. Um, as the interim AD, and then but I was there until February of 23 when I got this job here at Ball State. I would say that um, there are differences everywhere. There are similarities everywhere. The Ball State experience has been um, much more collaborative in terms of people with whom I interact. Now I'm sitting in a different seat on a permanent basis, so I'm a member of the president's cabinet. So I'm in higher level meetings where university business is being discussed, and but the relationships I have with my fellow vice presidents are really cordial. They're very supportive of athletics. I'm very supportive of their endeavors as well. And I think that's really neat to have that level of collaboration and camaraderie. I think the interaction with the students has been outstanding here. As you climb the ladder, so to speak, in my profession, I get more and more removed from spending time with students and student athletes. When I was coming up, when I was in sports information, I was talking to students all day. When I was in compliance, I was talking to student athletes all the time. So opportunities like this to come and hang out for a little bit is really cool. And there are times where I obviously get to talk to students Sometimes though, it's not necessarily in the best of circumstances, right? And so that I don't like as much either, but I'd rather have the positive interactions. And so I try to go to practice. I try to see uh, students after games and offer encouragement and so forth, and stop them in the hallway and talk to them for a little bit. But nevertheless, I've had more interaction because I've been a little bit more intentional about it to do it here than perhaps I did even at Southern Miss.
You mentioned too, as you move your way up the administrative ladder of sorts,
Yeah,
that there's degrees of removal from from the players, from the athletes.
sure.
I also think fans and spectators only get a certain side. So
Yeah.
it's kind of curious from your purview, what do you think most fans or spectators don't understand or maybe misunderstand about collegiate athletics?
Um, how do I say this without this appearing publicly anywhere? Um, Fans are passionate, and I like that. Uh, it's interesting to me that there's a lot of unsolicited feedback that that we get sometimes, and I appreciate it, but it's often rooted, and I say this in the nicest way possible. It's often rooted in just ignorance. They just don't know. They don't know. They don't understand the business, and it's no different than me trying to, go tell you name, a car dealership on McGalliard, me going in and saying, I don't think you're selling cars the right way. You should change the way you're doing that. Right? Who am I? I have no experience, right? And so it's funny sometimes when like, you should do this. Thank you for your feedback. I appreciate your uh your opinion. You just move on, right? You don't take it personally. It's not anything that is all that serious, but you want them engaged, so you want them to care. But and sometimes you just have to check them and just say, look, that's just not right at all. It's not how it works. And you do it, you have to do it though in a way that is um, that resonates with them. Like you can't be in my place, in my seat anyway, I can't be dismissive of a fan, even if they're making me angry. I have to handle it with a certain level of poise. And I've learned that over the years is, you're not, this person you may not like the conversation, or you may not like what a person says. It cannot ruin your day. There's so much more to it. I'm not suggesting that I haven't had my day ruined because of an interaction like that, but I also don't want to paint the picture that it happens all the time, right? By the way, and never go on message boards if you're a coach or an administrator, okay? That will ruin your day. Just stay away from it, because it oftentimes is these keyboard warriors being anonymous, hiding behind a deal, and it's not worth it. And that there's a lot of ignorance there.
I want to stay with that because I mean, this is a raw thought, but the Olympics, I know that that's
Yeah,
obviously not necessarily collegiate, but the men's figure skater, the one that was supposed to get the gold medal and kind of had the yips,
yeah,
and then all of a sudden it comes out that there was a lot of negativity.
yeah,
Now, I don't know if that's coming necessarily from fans, but this is kind of where this is going from.
yeah,
I'm kind of curious, just with the college athletes with whom you work and everybody's an individual, so this is more of a general statement. How do athletes respond to that kind of feedback that is so passionate,
yeah.
but also maybe uninformed?
Yeah, and I think there are places where it's worse than others. Okay. I don't know that it's necessarily all that harmful here. However, we are concerned as an enterprise, as a league, particularly as you get down to the end of basketball season, getting into the conference tournaments, going into March Madness. And for whatever reason, it's more prevalent from a basketball standpoint. But gambling and your online cyber hecklers that, and I think this is what you were alluding to. There's a lot of bullying that happens on social media platforms, and there's a lot of gambling that happens through these platforms. And so when you don't win something as a gambler, uh, you can resort to taking it out on, in our case, 18 to 22, 23-year olds and just eviscerate them,
Mhm.
online. And that can take a toll, right? I don't, I played baseball before social media, so I don't know what that's like, but I've seen enough hate that, I think some student athletes, uh, some students are able to handle it better than others. And, um, and I think that's a real concern that we're worried about. I know like our Office of Student Life on campus is concerned about it. Again, not necessarily from a Ball State perspective per se, but we'd all be naive to believe that it doesn't happen. But certainly as, and I think we haven't peaked yet in terms of the problem. So I think you're going to continue to read about it and see it and hear about it. And particularly now that online gaming is so prevalent. Uh, and, you guys, it is really prevalent on college campuses, really, really prevalent. And that's a concern.
Have you had a coach or a player actually come to you with like a specific incident that had them concerned?
Yeah. And you turn it over to the police, you turn it over to student life. When it comes to some gambling stuff, sometimes you get the FBI involved. So it's real. I mean, I've had issues along these lines at every institution where I've been. So at Santa Clara, at Southern Miss, and at Ball State.
And it- here again, you get a lot of noise, a lot of talking heads. I'm
Yep.
sure you've seen this, maybe heard this too. You have people talking about, college sports are dead, football, basketball, and a lot of it's because of NIL and transfer portal. Probably gambling is tied into that too. Just the nature of change. You have people maybe speaking in terms of hyperbole or gross exaggeration, because what I see when I'm watching, the games, I see full stands, I see,
Right.
a lot of money made on ticket sales.
Yep.
So I'm kind of curious, in your estimation, nobody's got a crystal ball, but what do you project as the future of college sports? How does it look?
I can go multiple different ways with that question. Um, the juiciest answer is that I think you see a breakaway in the next 5 to 10 years, where your quote unquote Power Four conferences, your SECs, your Big Tens, Big 12s, ACC, if they're even configured in their current state. I mean, shoot, the MAC just expanded yesterday. You
Mhm.
saw that news with Sacramento State now, a football affiliate member of our league, which, by the way, is a great thing just in terms of revenue generation coming into the league. I'll get back to your question in just a second, but just to harp on this. So Sacramento State has been an FCS program, so it's a level just below FBS. They desperately wanted to be an FBS program. The NCA, it used to be it was a $5,000 entry fee. Well, a couple of years ago, the NCAA changed that to make it harder to get to FBS, and the price of entry jumped from $5,000 to $5 million. Okay, so Sacramento State's paying $5 million to the NCAA, and then through the negotiation process, they were so desperate to do this, they're paying $18 million to the Mid American Conference to join the league in one sport only. They're not taking any distribution from the league. So we get a distribution every year from the league. It's how revenue flows in college athletics because we get NCAA distribution. Anyway, that's a conversation for another day. They're not going to take any distribution. It's a 5-year deal. They're going to pay their bowl subsidies, which we all contribute to the league a certain amount to help we pool our bowl funds. So when you qualify for a bowl, it lessens the burden. But we all pay into that. So Sacramento State is going to pay into that. By the way, they're not able to go to a bowl game for 2 years in this transition period. And on top of that, for the 5-year term, Sacramento State is paying for visiting travel. So the big planes that we will take to go play Sacramento State, it's going to be a ginormous plane, okay? Ginormous plane because we got to put our equipment on it. Because we're not traveling our equipment truck from Muncie, Indiana to Sacramento State, California. It's all going on the plane. I see some knowing eyes back there. It's all going on the plane. Okay. Sacramento State is paying for that 20 times, right? 4 home games out at Sacramento State a year for 5 years. Do the math. Okay. That jet is probably going to be 150 to $200,000, right? That you can do the math. It adds up to multiple $1 million on top of what they're paying. Okay, crazy. So I got off track on
I
that.
tell you what, let me ask you this. What do they stand to gain? I mean, yeah, they're in
I
it
have
for
no
one.
idea
Uh-huh. Okay. No idea.
because there's no way in the economics of it that they're going to recoup their investment.
That was gonna be my next question. How long would it take for them to recoup that?
Yeah.
Because that is a lot.
I know I've hit on an interesting topic. I got a question real quick. Do you mind?
Think in the future with the 5-year contract that like after it's done, you think they'll go back with us and add more sports into it, or do you think they'll just be a football?
I think it'll be a football only thing. I could see them joining another league in 5 years, or figuring out that it's not worth it and they've made a huge mistake. But all the money coming to the MAC is guaranteed, and Ball State will, receive a portion of that. So I got off the track. I do see a split.
Uh-huh.
I do think it'll be football specific. I do think you'll have maybe more mergers of FCS into FBS. And I think you may have the opportunity to see kind of a recalibration of what college sports looks like. You just won't have those quote unquote Power Four leagues. And who will be invited to that Super League? I don't know. Does it include basketball? I'm not sure. Basketball is a very specific NCAA championship. Football, by the way, guys, is not. It has nothing to do with the NCAA from a championship standpoint. Not connected with the NCAA in any shape or form. It's all through the college football playoff, which is a completely separate entity. So all the money that the NCAA makes, and it's an enormous amount, comes from primarily the men's basketball tournament every year.
Wow. And so then
I got you off track there. I'm sorry.
No, I mean it's good. And you mentioned the conference realignment too. I mean, as you're mentioning that, I'm thinking of Mountain West. I can't remember if they pulled FCS schools in or not, but I know they just brought in new schools into, like populate that and build it up a little bit more.
Yeah.
I don't know that
including a former MAC school.
Well, yeah, and I don't know if it's ever going to get into that upper echelon or not, but that's to your point. Will they ever, will we ever see that again? I don't know. Well, I tell you what, I'll ask like maybe 2 more and then we'll turn it over to the students. I would be curious how you would describe your administrative philosophy if you had to tweet it in like, a couple words.
I think I would reduce it to my core values. So it would be positivity, communication, helpfulness, and growth mindset. So I try to be as positive as I can in any situation. I believe that there's no better compliment to be given than to be called a good teammate. So I think that's falls in that helpfulness category. The communication standpoint is we can solve problems better together if we talk. Okay. And then the growth mindset is being able to ask questions about what's next, how can we, what if we, and I think that drives the way I work. And I don't force that upon our staff, but I certainly try to lead that way on a daily basis. And that guides me both personally and professionally.
And then my last question is, to what extent do you still value in terms of sports media, this person versus AI?
Oh, The authenticity and genuine nature of these type of exercises will always win the day. In my opinion, I think you can, you just tell a more compelling story when it's in the moment and, um, and real, right? So none of this was scripted, right? None of the, I had no idea what he was going to ask. I had no idea what I was going to say. Okay.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. All right. So let's do this. Actually, I'll let that go, the recording for questions, because that might be useful for later too. Brandon, you already asked one. We got someone else wants to ask a question. Now would be a good time. Jake.
So I've been able to ask this before, but like you talked about emphasizing the student athlete. And
Yep.
during your time here, we've been able to increase the cumulative GPA
Yep.
of student athletes. So what has your mindset been on that? And how have you been able to improve on it throughout your time here?
Yeah. So I'll give you another little illustration. Going back to my baseball affinity. If you look at a baseball diamond, so just think of our softball or baseball fields here, and if that student athlete centric vision that I have is represented by the pitcher's mound, student athlete is there. All the decisions that we make are always in the best interest of the student athlete. And first base is about academic success, a commitment to academic success. So when I talk about the importance of our cumulative GPA increasing year over year, our academic progress rate increasing, our graduation success rate being at an all-time high, that's what I'm talking about when I say a commitment to academic success. Okay. Second base, while we're on the bases, second base is about a commitment to institutional control. So we're going to follow rules, NCAA rules, whatever they are these days, MAC rules, university rules and regulations. Third base is about a commitment to physical responsibility. Like we have a moderate or a modest budget. Right? We have to make really good decisions about how we spend that money to maximize our growth and development of our programs. If we do those things well, we keep the student athlete at the center of the diamond, then we get to touch home plate, which is about winning championships. And we won 10 in the last 3 years. We won 16 over the last 5 years. We haven't had a stretch like that in those 3 and 5 years since the end of the 1990s, early 2000s. And, last year we won the Cartwright Award from the Mid-American Conference for the first time ever, which is given to the school, voted on peers or by peers, which means other people in the league recognized the success that we were enjoying and credited as being the most comprehensive, best athletics department in the league. Again, for the first time ever, which is pretty cool. But if we don't have that commitment to student development, student athlete development, academics success, we can't win that award, right? So I hope I answered your question.
Good one. What else can we ask Dr. Mitchell? Yes.
So going back to the mental health one, I mean, as the as a person that's played sports in the past and not had the greatest aspect as a team, how do you have the players, the coaching staff, the equipment managers, everyone in the building, how do you have their mindset still locked in for say the next game after losing here and just getting cracked all week?
Yeah, it's hard, right? From my vantage point, it's harder for me to answer that question because that really falls on our coaches to lead in those type of scenarios. My job to our head coaches, though, is to offer them the support that they need. And so, win or lose, all of our coaches, I do my best. I don't have 100% record, but it's really good. Try to reach out to offer them encouragement, whether they win or lose, and then visit with them. How can I help? Are there areas where I can provide some assistance? When you get specifically on the topic of mental health and mental performance, I think those are areas where we have to do a better job. We're not where we want to be yet with that, and part of it is resource based, and we've got some plans to try to improve it. It's just not an overnight type deal. But, losing is part of winning. Losing is a part of the intercollegiate athletics experience. Newsflash, losing is a part of life, right? We're gonna suffer our setbacks, and more than half the battle is how you respond to it. Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask you about like attendance. So for football, Akron was the only MAC school who had lower attendance than us. How important to you is it to getting more people to our games?
Yep.
And I feel like the alumni always show up when you go to our games, but is there steps being taken to get more students to these games?
Yeah. If I could take the energy and enthusiasm from across the street and just have a big old net and just pick them up and move them across into the student section, we'd have an unbelievable game day experience in Schumann Stadium. I was told when I got here that it was going to be a struggle. I didn't truly appreciate it until the first year when I saw it, and I couldn't believe the amount of people that were out there tailgating. Like, it's off the charts, crazy good. And how in the world we can grab them and get them into the stadium continues to baffle me. And yes, I get the product on the field has to improve. I think it's going to continue to do that. And I think that will attract some interest. But, going to a college football game at your college is fun. At least it was for me. It is for me. It has been for me for a long time. The more I can encourage you guys to do it and experience it, the better. I don't know that the solution is to add more value to it, even though I do know that people value things that are more valued than just free. Like, it's free to go. So you'd think that would just be an open invitation. I don't know. But at the same time, I don't know that we can start charging students either. So it's it's a challenge. Thanks for bringing it up.
Good. Any other questions? Got time for a few more. Sydney, and then
So how has your time as a student athlete in college helped you or like guide your decisions now for your job?
That's a good question. I think that how I lead, how I want our coaches to lead is rooted in how I was treated as a student athlete. And I thought that I was cared for and coached and developed. And I think that's the way that I go about my business, is the development of others, whether they're student athletes, whether it's members of my staff, that report directly to me, or whether it's members of our staff that, are in the kind of the middle management, and whether it's students that don't play sports but are working in our department, and how we can encourage the continued growth and development through experience working in the space. Because I got my start that way. I mean, I was a student worker, and I've had the good fortune to be either an interim or a permanent director of athletics at the 3 institutions where I've worked.
Jalen.
What are your thoughts on athletes coming from like pro leagues back to collegiate athletics, like the Alabama situation?
Crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So when you hear and read reports, or even amongst yourselves speculate, well, the NCAA is doing this. The NCAA is us. Ball State made rules along with the 300 and some odd other schools that represent Division I athletics together. Collectively, we voted on the rules. We are the NCAA. What's happened is, once we were bound by rules, and it's been like this, by the way, for decades, if you break the rule, there's punishment. Well, schools began to not like the fact that they were being bound by rules when they broke the rules. And so they got their attorneys general involved and sued the NCAA. And so now we're in a system where anything that a school doesn't like is litigated, right? And so now you've got players coming from the G League, and it's basketball centric right now. Some of whom have been a lot. My former employer at Santa Clara, they're killing it right now in basketball. They've got a former G League. There was the first one, and he's playing. And Baylor's got one. There's another one somewhere, I think, and then the Alabama case where he played 5 games, but now he's not eligible anymore. Uh, it's crazy. It's in the court system, and it's crazy that we're having this conversation today. I like the question, but I can't believe we're having a conversation because it's just not. It's long been a rule, and I'm not suggesting rules can't change, but if you're, and guys, I get the hypocrisy of this. College athletics has been rooted in amateurism for so long. Now we have student athletes receiving financial benefits through payments, right? In this rev share NIL era. Does that make them professional? I don't know. It's certainly emerging as a professionalized model, but it's different from the truly professional model of the NBA, Major League Baseball, hockey, football, on and on. Maybe one day it changes completely, but right now, you're seeing judges now saying, all right, enough is enough. But it's still a crazy world out there from a litigation standpoint. Great question.
Reagan and then Brandon.
Obviously, working in sports is very time consuming, and I think you mentioned that you have 2 kids.
Yeah.
How have you been able to maintain that work life, home life balance?
So I really love this question. This is the no offense to everybody else, but this is the best one. Okay. So because I've learned a lot. My wife and I have been married for 20 years. And she has been supporting me through my career, and she's in the high tech space. She's got her own fabulous career too. But when the kids are younger, and we were living in California, and she was working in the high tech space. We dropped the kids off at daycare, fabulous daycare. They learned they're smart, not because of mom and dad, but because of the daycare they went to. And we didn't worry about them because we knew they were well cared of, but we worked like crazy, right? And then the kids started getting older. They started getting activities. You have to get them to places. When we moved from Santa Clara to Southern Miss, which was a little bit of a homecoming for us. My wife's from Mississippi as well. I realized for the first time that I could go to a Southern Miss or that I could miss a Southern Miss athletics event and the event was still going to happen. Like I didn't have to be there. At Santa Clara, I thought that there was no way that an athletics event would happen without my presence. And I'm being a little bit silly when I say that, but it was when I finally said, okay, I'm in a position now where, yes, there are going to be things that I have to attend. There's going to be some things that I'm going to miss from a family situation. But as my daughter was getting into high school and playing soccer, and she's been a very competitive soccer player for a long time, I vowed that I'm not going to miss. Like even if unless it was and it was never going to conflict with a football game. Games were going to be in the middle of the week, or maybe there was going to be a weekend where she played. My wife would go, but for the most part, I wasn't going to miss, and just was very clear with my staff, very clear with my boss. I'm not missing this because it's going to be over soon, right? And what a freeing thing that was for me because it made me a better dad, a better husband, and maybe better at the workplace too. And so I have instilled that in my staff. And the minute they get the words out of their mouth, like I got to go to my kids or whatever, yeah, you're gone. Like we got it. We'll figure it out. And there's still things that I miss. Like I was traveling yesterday. My kid, my seventh grader, had a AAU basketball game that he was in. He had a game-winning 3 to win it. Fortunately, it was on film, so I got to see it, but I missed it, right? And it was just I was fired up for him, but I also was just gut-wrenched because I didn't get to see it in person. They understand the business that I'm in and that I'm going to miss some things, but I'm so much more intent on prioritizing them than I was before, particularly when they're at the age where they are now. And I'm trying to coach my son's baseball team. It is it's just important to me. And again, I think it makes me better everywhere. And that's how I balance it. But I haven't always been great at it.
Oh, okay. Well, give you one more last call. I mean, who wants it? And then, like I said, like I promised, I'd like to do, I mean, then we're kind of like, you and I are off and we can kind of talk a little more X's and O's. So last call, Alex, okay.
So going back to kind of the general college athletic space, akin to the NBA, G Leaguers coming back down, specifically with the transfer portal, I've seen a lot of how this Wild West era of college sports is influencing it. How have you seen it on the mid-major level? How has the transfer portal affected recent teams' success or failures?
Great question. I think what you're seeing now as our coaches get better at evaluating talent, I think particularly you will see it in football. I hope so. We got the best recruiting class in football that we've had in over a decade coming in. Now, the proof's in the pudding, right? We'll find out. We also play really challenging schedules. But I think we're getting better at evaluating talent and recruiting talent. The biggest travesty for the transfer portal means that I think it's still like a 40% clip of student athletes don't end up somewhere else after they enter the portal, which means they lose their scholarship where they are hoping to transfer from. And if they don't get picked up, obviously they're not going to matriculate anywhere else. And maybe they do on their own, but there's just a lot of lost opportunity there, which was never the intent from a access to college standpoint. So that's nobody wants to talk about that because it's not a feel-good story. Everybody wants to concentrate on the 1% that are making some really lucrative money out of playing sports. And I get it, but there's so much more to it. And we concentrate on these power 60 some odd programs, half of which aren't as powerful as the top 30. But you guys, we got 300 other institutions that is Division I, and then you got D2 and D3. Like the vast majority of college sports is happening on campuses like Ball State, and we can't lose sight of that. But it does impact us. And yes, we lose some talent to the portal, but we also pick up some really good talent too. So I'm not sure that it doesn't just wash itself, that way.
Right. Let me check that. So